Hello and welcome to another Overlord lore video, and today, after several videos just dedicated to Pandora's actor, we will finally dive into the battle you have all been waiting for, and rightfully so. But before we do this, I say thanks to my Patreons for supporting this channel. Now, the battle of Pandora's actor against Platinum Dragonlord is one of the most meaningful, deep, and layered battles in all of fantasy. And therefore let's begin by establishing the goal of the two combatants. First and foremost, Ainz Ooal Gown was extremely worried about the unknown enemy that had attacked Shaltir. He knows that they are in possession of a world item, and therefore are very likely to be enemy players, or pose at the very least a comparable threat. And now finally, after more than 11 volumes of waiting, Ainz encountered definite proof that other players were here by encountering the armor of Azud. With this confirmed, he conceived a plan to lure out the enemy that thus far had eluded him. After almost turning Shaltir against the guild, he would present himself vulnerable, meaning without his army, his world item, and only Albedo and a few Death Knights as his guard. This in and of itself was a balance act, because by being guarded by too many high-level beings, he might accidentally disencourage his enemies from actually attacking him. Or if he had shown himself vulnerable without any good reason, then his adversaries perhaps might sense the trap, and thus also refrain from doing anything. The choice of his sole remaining guardian wasn't random either. Albedo, with her incredible defensive build and her world item, is very believable in her role, while also presenting the last true obstacle between the would-be avengers of the kingdom and Ainz. And as the Prime Minister of the Sorcerer Kingdom, it was also a natural thing that the first and the second in command of the state would be at the same place during a war, or rather its final phase to be more precise. With this bait laid, all Ainz had to do was to explain the plan he for once actually had to a few persons involved. But Aura, for example, was left in the dark about why Ainz hadn't equipped his world item, while Albedo knew about the reason behind it. In case of downfall of castle and country would have been brought to bear against somebody not intended to fight his enemies. Also Mare and especially Aura, being children and thus rather impulsive, might accidentally say something that would reveal too much information, like Naberal Gamma did during her time with Swords of Darkness. Ainz, by denying Pandora's actor any protection against them, also made any attempt at attacking the supposed Overlord more tempting, while also still keeping the risk extremely low for him. And the reason for this is surprisingly simple. Even if Pandora's actor should fall into the sway of the other side, Aura could also just trap the world itemless Pandora's actor in her own world item, depiction of nature and society, and use the NPC spawning on the inside to rush down Pandora, kill him, and thus remove the mind control. Simultaneously, some of the attackers might also have been trapped, and thus Ainz would have eliminated his enemies, gained a source of information, and deprived the enemy world-class item bearer from any protection from his friends. But in case that none of this happened and the mysterious enemy would just send out a kill team, or indeed a kill person, then Pandora's actor was instructed to gather as much information as possible about the enemy, while Ainz Ooal Gown himself would also watch via the mirror of remote viewing, analyzing their every move until Pandora's actor had lost, at which point Albedo was instructed to rush in and end the fight. Ainz would then use the information gained to pinpoint the enemy, their allies, motives, and their number, in order to gain as much insight as possible. Only if this last stage of the plan had succeeded, he would presumably mobilize the tomb and eliminate his enemy root and stem, taking whenever possible prisoners, in order to take excessive revenge. So the very first stage, the very first battle in his plan, was no real battle at all, but only a means to gather information. Now, compared to all of this, the goal of Platinum Dragonlord was simple. Eliminate the Sorcerer King and thus save if not the Kingdom of Riestais, but at the very least the New World, and perhaps one of his pet projects, the Arkland Council State, where he returned his armor to. But Platinum achieved none of his goals. At the end, the Riestais Kingdom was lost, and the Arkland Council State, where he presumably resides at the very moment, now shares a border with one of his arch enemies. And the fight itself was masterfully constructed, from the setup all the way to the very end, with only some minor problems, like Platinum escaping a bit too early. I mean, sure, Platinum Dragonlord was lured into a trap. This in and of itself is nothing special, but while any entity that was ambushed will eventually realize that they are the target, that they are the one the enemy is after, and that they indeed had ran straight into a trap, it is due to the masterful display of strategic planning, foresight, caution, and sheer guile from both Ainz Ooal Gown and by extent Pandora's actor that allowed the two to be able to thoroughly deceive Platinum Dragonlord to the point that he didn't even realize that he was the target all along. In Sandorcus' mind, he was the one who acted, the one who knocks, the one who almost killed Ainz, if it hadn't been for Albedo, while in reality, all of this was much closer to a scientist studying a wild animal, hunting its prey. And again, Platinum hadn't had any idea that he was being watched and deceived, and therefore he had drawn the completely wrong conclusions from this battle. For example, at the end of it, he believed that the person in front of him was actually Ainz Ooal Gown, that Ainz was inferior to even his armor, that the world-class item of the guild is actually in the hands of Albedo, and that at most, 2 world items are in the possession of Nezarec, that Ainz can't escape his world-separating barrier, that he managed to deceive the Overlord by naming himself Rico Agnea, and that Ainz Ooal Gown, while relatively weak, is immune to blunt damage. This, and I have to stress this again, is the truly brilliant part. Platinum Dragonlord was puppeteered while believing to be the master of puppets. And even worse for the Dragonlord, Ainz Ooal Gown didn't get careless after his victory, while he now holds an advantage of information about him. Ainz didn't was all about attacking the enemy headlong, but he intended to fight against Platinum again, and lose in order to confirm his information. In other words, while Platinum Dragonlord planned to attack him by dragging his real body out of his hiding place for once. He won't encounter an overconfident or frightened Overlord. He won't encounter a villain, explaining his brilliant plan to the hero. Now, thinking about it, he might actually do this, but the plan itself will have been nothing more but well-crafted lies, perhaps sparkled with some half-truths, some facts, and a display of over-ambitiousness here and there, in order to keep things believable, while Ainz in actuality remains careful to the point of being paranoid, and he won't hesitate to retreat if Platinum turns out to be significantly stronger than the encounter with Pandora's actor had led him to believe. And perhaps after losing 2 times, once by proxy and once against the real body, Ainz might at the very end of the story conclude that this battle is best fought by overwhelming might, and thus he might finally activate Rubedo. Alternatively, during the second fight, Ainz might finally use the red orb, that is supposedly a world item and holds powers, very effective against dragons. Maybe he even ends the Dragonlord by accident during his second duel. Just imagine the reactions of the floor guardians to this. Now, after we have been over the aims and goals of the combatants, let's dive into the actual combat. And it all began during the invasion of the kingdom of Rheastais, after Philippe displayed his non-existent intelligence, which would later be rewarded by getting what he always wanted: Albedo, spending time with him and exploring every inch of his body. Anyway, back to topic. After the invasion has almost concluded, the Sorcerer King had set up camp near the capital city of Rheastais, and after a failed meeting with Prince Zanak, Ainz had sent most of his guardians, namely Aura, Mara and Cocytus, away with basically the entirety of his army, leaving only Albedo and a couple of Death Knights as a personal guard. After his allies began the assault and thus were occupied, a red suit appeared, hovering in the air, and it began attacking the camp, easily killing the remaining Death Knights with Chain Dragon Lightning. Albedo, seemingly enraged by this blatant attempt on the Sorcerer King's life, went after the red suit and started herself a mock battle. Now, right off the back, Platinum Dragonlord had basically sent Azud Ainra to his death. If Albedo had been serious, Azud would have been crushed. But ironically, both Azud and Albedo had the same goal in mind: occupying the other long enough, ideally with talk rather than action, so that Platinum can battle Ainz. And the survival of Azud was even so unexpected that Platinum at least considered the idea that Azud Ainra had maybe betrayed him and conspired with the Sorcerer Kingdom, or at least Albedo, which again in the mind of the Dragonlord would explain why he's even still alive. Another aspect that shows you just how far off Platinum's calculations truly were. After Albedo gave pursuit, Platinum Dragonlord's armor appeared behind Ainz Ooal Gown and attacked him. And just after a few blows, Pandora's actor achieved a small victory already, because he had gotten Platinum to introduce himself as Riku, proving that this enemy in front of him can speak, is sentient, is willing to talk to his enemies, and has some basic concept of names and decency. After this, the Platinum Warrior had put up the world separating barrier, which Ainz promptly tried to breach by teleporting at its end, but he couldn't get through it. Platinum also teleported after him, continued his threats by stating that even if Ainz would teleport away again, that he couldn't leave the barrier, and that he will be ended today. Again giving up valuable information about the nature of the barrier he created. Pandora's actor as Ainz Ooal Gown also picked up on the unusual behavior of the armored enemy in front of him. He didn't flinch, jumped, or backed off, while being exposed to the most dire of attacks and spells. These instinctual reactions to extreme danger apparently didn't happen, and Riku was relentlessly pursuing and attacking Ainz, rushing down the undead Overlord without fear or hesitation throughout the entirety of this fight. Now, after trading some more blows, flying into the air and then returning to the ground, Platinum slowly accepted that Ainz can't be harmed by bludgeoning damage. Of course not by telling him this, but by using his floating greatsword as more or less his main weapon during the remainder of this battle by picking it up with his own hands. During the following bits of combat, Pandora's actor also realized that this Riku in front of him would take damage from lightning spells. A very important info, since Ainz likes to use tripled maximized Call Greater Thunder against both Shaltir and Yaldabaoth, aka the Demon of Wrath. The next move of Pandora's actor was to summon a Doom Lord, and having it deal with the melee part of the battle for him. Upon clashing against the great weapon of Platinum, the air was ringing with a loud shrieking noise, as both fought another without moving even a single inch back. And so yet another interesting information was revealed about the enemy. A Doom Lord, a level 70 undead being, could withstand Riku. Now a Doom Lord is considerably stronger than his level would let on, and this greater power is achieved in exchange for a steadily decreasing health pool. The Doom Lord could also accelerate the amount of health lost, in exchange for even greater strength, neglectance of the enemy's level-based damage reduction, as well as negating any bonus damage taken due to karma. So therefore it was a fairly accurate picture the Doom Lord was able to get from Riku Aganea's combat abilities. And we also have to take into account that the real Ainz Ooal Gown would be able to create an even stronger Doom Lord, since he can buff it, like he buffed the Guava. And the Elder Lich received quite the stat boost from Ainz. So a proper Doom Lord with Ruinous Knight activated might be able to beat back Platinum's armor and gain the upper hand in the battle. So if the Doom Lord could, for example, gain the combat strength of a level 90 monster, then Platinum Dragonlord's armor would be around the same strength. So with this short clash alone, Pandora's actor secured a scale with which to measure the strength of the armored enemy. Naturally, the rapidly depleting health pool of the Doom Lord was a problem, so Ainz decided to replenish it and to damage Riku by using Negative Burst, an area of attack negative energy shockwave that, while managing to heal the Doom Lord, did absolutely nothing to Riku himself. With the enemy occupied, Pandora disguised himself by using Perfect Unknowable, only to be penetrated by a floating katana shortly after. The ability of Riku to see through such a high-tier spell of invisibility in an instant was indeed something to take note of. After this, Pandora's actor ordered his Doom Lord to make full use of Ruinous Knight, and as the Doom Lord released more and more of his unlife, his attack power, speed, and sheer undiluted ferocity gave it the upper hand for a brief moment, before finally disappearing due to its rapid HP loss. confirming that Ainz Ooal Gown's own Doomlord, if strengthened by his special skills, would be able to occupy the armor without burning to its HP so fast. After this, the fake Ainz decided to test the magic resistances of Rico thoroughly by summoning an elemental skull, a caster able to use very high tier magic, such as Polar Claw, which was ice-based, or an acid-based mist, that ate through Platinum's armor and his weapons, while Ainz fried the armor with Vermilion Nova. But despite all of this, and despite all of it being effective, the armor attacked him relentlessly, pummeling him with strikes from all weapons, except the hammer. And Ainz was trading HP at a great loss due to the armor's seemingly high magic resistances, being pushed closer and closer to defeat. And here Pandora's actor played his greatest trick so far. Before Platinum could finish him, he threw away his weapon, went on his knees, and told Rico that all of this was the fault of the Kingdom of Riestais, because they attacked a convoy delivering humanitarian aid to the Holy Kingdom. This caught him completely off guard. So he stopped the attack, and he began lecturing the Sorcerer King on how he way overdid it, and that he should have found another way to resolve this crisis, while also beginning to justify his own actions to himself, by stating that while he acknowledges that his father, and by extent his race, was the ultimate culprit of all of the events unfolding, he doesn't seek to repent for the sins of his father, or his very own. Indeed, he blames the careless use of power as the ultimate problem here, apparently the same thing that led to the death of his mother, at the hand of Yggdrasil players. So Platinum gave a lamenting speech including vital parts of his own backstory to Ainz, who thus far had to struggle to get him even to talk at all. And not only that, his movements and attacks were much slower and downright sluggish after Pandora's actor had managed to successfully guilt-trip Platinum. But this guilt turned to anger as Ainz tried to save himself from the resumed attacks. The undead tried to use time magic to freeze Platinum and greater break item to destroy his weapons, which the armor resisted with apparently little effort. And after the elemental skull was defeated and the fate of the Sorcerer King was apparently sealed, Albedo came crashing through the world-separating barrier. This is where the boss music starts, and Rico realized that there would be a second phase to the fight. Albedo, with her weapon/world item at hand, hammered down with enough force to sink the armor partially into the ground, and then launch it straight to orbit. In a shocking turn of events, Platinum was now the target. But to his surprise, Albedo ceased with his attacks, and he again was offered to join the Sorcerer Kingdom. But naturally he declined, and by declining I mean that he fled by casting World Teleportation, and met up with Azud Aindra. So at the end of the battle, Platinum had more questions than answers. Was Ainz Ooal Gown really the great Sorcerer King after all, or just an NPC, while Albedo is the true player? Or perhaps both are players, and one left his own world item, which Tsarendorkus found unlikely, and while reflecting about this and which consequences the murder of one of his allies would have, he returned his armor to the Arclan Council State. In conclusion, Platinum Dragonlord had lost, and even worse, he didn't realize it. Now, after studying the battle, we will go over the knowledge itself, and try to come up with a approximation of the build of Platinum Dragonlord's armor. Now, first and foremost, this can only describe his armor and not his actual body, since Platinum Dragonlord is obviously a different build than his animated armor. But since his armor is such a vital part of his character, and thus far had been the only thing that had actually fought somebody else, it still holds significance. Generally speaking, Platinum's armor is kind of a warlock build, a battle wizard if you will. But instead of being 50% magic and 50% melee, it's more like a physical fighter build augmented with magic, since we don't know more about how magic is distributed in relation to his warrior skills, but I've seen that the armor fights as a warrior. Let's just apply the Pareto principle and say it's 80% warrior and 20% magic. So depending on your stance on wild magic, I believe the term Paladin describes Platinum Dragonlord's armor even better. But in any case, the kind of magic wielded here also needs to absolutely be highlighted, for it is wild magic, the magic of the soul. And every time he casts his wild magic spells, his health pool also decreases. So right off the bat, this way of casting has a great risk to it. A right spell casted at a wrong time can decide about victory or defeat. And defeat in this case might actually mean death. But while rather risky, the effects achieved by wild magic are very rewarding indeed. The ability to teleport anywhere in an instant. Basically, world teleportation is the wild magic equivalent of the gate spell. The ability to create a world separating barrier. Able to fence in all of the beings of the new world, unable to use wild magic themselves. And of course the ability to remotely animate the entire armor. And the free-floating weapons are all incredibly beneficial, and especially the last part reminds me of Edström, except on a much higher level. In fact, his armor might even be part of this weapon set, and Platinum can also wield his weapons to a far greater degree of sophistication. Every weapon of him is also unique in the damage it deals, and therefore effective against different beings. Bludgeoning damage is great against Ainz and other undead, while a paper-based heteromorph would likely be susceptible to cutting damage in the extreme. Still, the weapons held in reserve could also be used to block incoming attacks, or be flung at the enemy to keep him moving, unable to focus on long-ranged attacks. Think of how Sasuke kept Naruto from spamming shadow clones during the last battle. In essence, Platinum needs just to target the position where his enemy stands, in order to prevent him from aiming or even to interrupt his casting, like Doppelshizo Delta did during the battle against the Pleiades and the Demon of Wrath in Volume 13. Now his mana pool is also quite likely equivalent to his health pool, thanks to wild magic. But thus far it is unclear if the armor can even use tier magic, though it shouldn't be able to. While Hylial and Curelim could do it, true Dragonlords normally couldn't use both at the same time, and Platinum Dragonlord might even have existed before the players appeared, and therefore likely wasn't even born with the potential to use tier magic. Though it would be interesting if he could use it by proxy, aka if he could potentially use the Horn of the Goblin General or a Wand of Resurrection. The armor has also a very high magic resistance to it, enabling it to simply fight despite being bombarded with high tier magic, and still trading HP in the battle effectively, at least when fighting against Pandora's Actor. And the magic resistance also includes total immunity to negative energy based attacks, and quite likely negative energy in general, which actually might be due to the armor just being that. An armor, devoid of any living matter. If this explanation for the immunity to negative energy holds, then perhaps Platinum Dragonlord's real body is susceptible to it, but it could also be that the wild magic that animates the body. Therefore I guess we have to see how the second battle goes. In order to be sure, he also resisted Greater Brick Item, either due to level difference, or due to the wild magic nature of his armor. The armor should also have either something I would call World Eye, enabling it to feel the energy around enemies, and thus to see through any disguise, including Perfect Unknowable, or something like Karma Detection, which would enable the user, in this case Platinum Dragonlord, to see other entities even with evil karma, and even when disguised. And the later of the two options would be more plausible, given that Platinum explicitly noted the evil aura of Shaltir, and actively sought her out. Now, despite the high magic resistance, he can be affected by lightning, fire, cold, and acid-based attacks, as well as physical damage of course. Now his melee capabilities are on par with a level 70 Doomlord, with Ruinous Night enabled, though if it accelerates its own demise, it could win the upper hand for a short moment. So I would put his overall combat abilities, just based on the Doomlord incident, around that of a level 85 to 90 character, min-maxed for melee. Think of him like Gurren, the Magma Slime. The armor is also stated to be stronger than the first seed of the Black Scripture, the male godkin that looks like the main villain from Final Fantasy XII, but weaker than Curelim, the undead Dragonlord Ainz eliminated in the bonus novel. It should also be noted that all the characters thus far that had fought him estimated his build to be of a different level. For Pandora's actor who fought him as a 20% weaker version of Ainz Ooal Gown, a caster build who wasn't even min-maxed for combat, he estimated the armor to be around level 90, while Shaltir, the overall strongest floor guardian, estimated the armor to be around level 85. And again, she is the strongest, had ein Harrier, a bunch of summonings, her lance, her armor, her ring that allowed her to return from the death, but was also under mind control at this time. And last but not least, the tanky Albedo estimated the armor to be around level 80, though she attacked him with a world item equipped. So take the statement, like everyone else's estimation, including my own, with a grain of salt. And if I had to compare the armor to something from Nazarik's own guild, it would be either Gurren or the primal fire elemental Aura and Maro fought in the 4th volume as a kind of training / anti-boredom measure. Though the ability to force combat against anyone weaker than him, for example the entirety of the Pleiades 6-star formation, excluding Sebas, makes him still extremely dangerous for weaker beings, especially if a communication blackout occurs for some reason. Though thinking about it, Platinum Dragonlord's armor against the Pleiades, excluding Oriel Omega, would make an extremely tense and interesting fight, and one where Nazarik is the underdog for once. And with that said, I say thank you very much for watching, and special thanks to Adam J, Al Capone, Andy, Angel of Death, Bad Guy Yee, Boyzilla, Chrissy, Diabetic Centaur, Dystopia, Elika Birchleaf, Phalis Catus, Thuralshivan, Gigafight, Ghost of Epicness, Hector Marino, Black Phoenix Emperor, Hoss, Jana B, Jason, Kleinator, Chromius, Large, Legendarius, Lord Nishikian Rai, Lord Touch Me, Lord Ulbert Elaine Odell, Luces Ollie, Lexus Fox, Majima, Mad C, Marcos, Mr. Shoes, Mindless Wrath, Minnow 13, Myrtis, Nefarious Potion, Primus 11, Sasuga Einsama, Sebastian, Shadow Lightning Wolf, Surge, Sparkly Unicorn, Sunlight, the Orc Warboss Rock Edsmasher, Vash Hawkeye, Zoggo Bane of a Lot, and Sonnegon. Thanks guys. Anyway, have a nice day, over and out.